Tracy is a senior staff engineer at Slack. Um, Prior to Slack, Tracy worked at Adobe for many, many years, specializing in client networking and support for streaming audio, video, and screen sharing. Tracy lives in San Francisco with her husband and two kids. Welcome, Tracy.
So yes, my name is Tracy Stampley. I'm a senior staff engineer at Slack. I lead the iOS infrastructure team, and iOS infrastructure basically handles things like networking and data syncing and kind of all the stuff that's a bit under the hood of the app, supporting the UI and the features. And I'm going to talk about modernizing mobile code bases, but I'm really going to talk about kind of modernizing and refactoring code bases in general. So I hope that a lot of this talk is actually generally applicable and not just about mobile. So I'm going to talk about some things we've learned from doing a rewrite, or at least a partial rewrite, of both our iOS and Android code bases at Slack. Why do we think this was necessary? What decisions do we make about how to re-architect our code? And what has made this successful, at least so far? It's still in progress. So why do we decide to do this? Well, Slack's mobile code bases had not really had a big rewrite or refactor in a long time. Slack's been around for about 7 years, and on iOS, we hadn't actually done a refactor in that entire time, or a major refactor. Android had done one about 5 years ago, but that's still a while. And both of these code bases had a lot of tech debt. They had a lot of obsolete design patterns that didn't match up with how we do things now. And there were a lot of inconsistencies, 5 different ways to do the same thing. That made it really confusing for new engineers and hard to onboard, because it was hard to figure out what the right way to do things was. The code was fragile and too tightly coupled, which made it easy to inject bugs. And all of these things added up to slow down feature development, and that became a really big problem. Mobile development was starting to be a drag on feature development in general at Slack, and that was something we knew that we had to tackle and do something about. So we decided we really needed to prioritize addressing this tech debt and invest in more modern architecture and improve our development practices to speed things up. So we're deciding how to do this. There are a number of options. We're going to do a big, refactor. So how are we going to do this? We considered a few things. We could do just a full rewrite of our mobile apps. And, there's some nice aspects of that. You get to kind of just toss out the legacy code and start afresh, new project, just start going with, new patterns, do it the right way that you'd like to kind of rewrite all the features. But obviously there's some risks with this as well. You have to, if you're going to start from scratch and just fully rewrite the app, you have to bring it all the way up to feature parity with your existing code. And for a product like Slack that's been around for a long time and, has a lot of features, that's going to be a really massive task. While you're doing that, you have to maintain 2 code bases. You have to keep the new code base up. There's going to be feature development going on. So you have to be doing sort of dual feature development in the old code base and the new code base. And overall, this is just kind of a very big, risky bet. What happens if you don't ship that new modern code base for some reason? You've kind of wasted a huge amount of work. So we decided this was a bit too risky for us. We considered some other options. When you talk about speeding up mobile development, one option that comes up a lot is sharing code. There's a number of ways to do this. We could share code between iOS and Android. We could share code between the mobile apps and the desktop. There's different frameworks for sharing code. You can share UI code or business logic. Slack actually tried to do some shared business logic a few years ago across the clients, and it didn't actually work out too well. And there are, again, some benefits here. You can, obviously there's this benefit of not rewriting the same feature or the same logic 3 times or however many clients you have. You can also hopefully maybe share some resources, developer resources across platforms if you go this route. But there's also, again, downsides. Shared code complicates your tooling. It makes things like just debugging, building the CI system, all of those things become more complicated. It's also, the big danger is that you might, under this, if you share code, you might lose native look and feel or native performance. And this is a big issue for mobile. We really want to take advantage of the latest and greatest features that each of the platforms has to offer. We want our iOS apps to feel like great native iOS apps, and same with Android. We want performance to be great on our mobile platforms. So this was something that we were definitely worried about. And also developer sentiment about this idea was just not very good. Our developers were just not excited about doing shared code. And if the developers aren't excited about it, it's unlikely to be successful. So what's left basically? Well, you could kind of refactor your existing code base in place, essentially rebuild the airplane as you're flying it. And this is the option we ended up going with. There's some kind of, again, benefits and downsides to it. Benefit, reduced risk. We are basically having to refactor and ship this code base continually. We just have one code base, so at any given point in time, it always has to be shippable because we have to keep releasing it. We get faster payoff because as we're modernizing that code base, it is continually being improved, and everyone working on the team is getting the benefit of that improved code base as we go along. We don't have to do this dual code bases, try and develop things in both thing, which seems very challenging. But it does mean that we don't get to kind of just get rid of our legacy code. We have to actually deal with it. We can't get rid of the tech debt. We have to migrate and re-architect our existing code base. So we launched this thing called Project Duplo. And you may have noticed there's kind of a Lego Duplo theme to this presentation. That's because, as I'll talk about a bit more later, one of the big themes of Project Duplo was modularization, or breaking down the code base into smaller building blocks, and Duplo are kind of the larger Lego bricks. So yes, basically a big theme about kind of breaking down the app monolith. So this was a big re-architecture of both of our mobile code bases that we launched a little while ago. It was coordinated across both mobile platforms. So iOS and Android came up with proposals together, did an investigation together, scoped this effort together. We're now running the project together. So this was all a coordinated effort. The goals were, number one, improve developer velocity, start shipping features faster, but also adopt modern design patterns, kind of bring some of the patterns in our app to be more in keeping with current mobile development practices, and really enable larger teams. Obviously the mobile teams of Slack have grown a great deal since the company started, and we hope they're going to grow a bunch more. And the kind of patterns that work for smaller development teams don't necessarily work for a team of 40, and it works for a team of 40 may not work for a team of 100. So we really wanted to enable our growing development team, and also set us up to adopt future technologies we might be interested in. Like right now, we aren't actually using Swift UI, but we might want to in the future, and we want to have an architecture that keeps that door open and allows us to have that possibility. So this project had 3 phases. The first phase that we called Stabilization. And the idea here was to complete a bunch of ongoing migrations and refactors that we already kind of had in flight, things that we'd started, but then didn't have the resources to finish. So again, that was really leading to inconsistency. So we wanted to remove the worst of the tech debt, the worst of the anti-patterns, and just kind of clean the code base up to set us up for the rest of the project. This phase had very well-defined work streams and really clear metrics for success. So we really could track our work very well. I'm not going to get too deep into the details of what we actually did on each platform due to lack of time, but this is just some highlights of some of the top goals on each platform. On iOS, we wanted to move to being 100% Swift. We were already about 80% before this project started, and we wanted to kind of finish some migrations onto some of our infra frameworks. Similarly, on Android, you'll see these common themes of finishing migrations, finishing adoptions of different patterns and different frameworks, and kind of breaking down some of the infra frameworks to be more usable. So the second phase here was modularization, and here we're getting into the building blocks. The idea here is that we had already somewhat modularized our code. We had on both iOS and Android, we had some code that was split off into frameworks, but we wanted to go a lot further in that direction because there's a lot of benefits to this. By breaking the code apart into smaller frameworks and kind of breaking up that big app target, you reduce interdependencies. You remove this kind of tight coupling between features that can make things more fragile and introduce bugs. You enable, you have to have separation of concerns because you're actually separating the code out. And this enables developers to work better, independently from each other, and also improves build times, because if you're building, your feature in a framework, as you make changes, you only have to rebuild that framework and not the entire app target. The third phase was modernization. And this is the one where, again, we're really trying to look forward and think about what architecture patterns do we want to adopt that will make us compatible with current industry trends, but also will set us up for the next 5 years of app development. So we got into this project, and as we got started and we're going through the stabilization phase, we realized that actually this whole 3 phases thing wasn't such a great idea. We realized that we should actually combine our 3 phases back down into 2 and combine the modularization and modernization phases, because we realized that if we had these, we're doing these separately, you would kind of refactor some code to split it out from the app and modularize it, and then you'd refactor it again to modernize it. And that was going to entail a lot of wasted effort. So to avoid refactoring things twice, we combined these phases and just made it a 2-phase project. So now it's just stabilization and modernization. And as we were deciding to what we were going to do for our modernization and trying to decide like what patterns we should pick, we did a lot of research with our developers, talking to our developers, doing focus groups, doing polling, trying to figure out what are the current pain points and what do developers want to see out of this project? What do they really want us to do? And what we heard from them was interesting, because we didn't hear like that they felt super strongly about one particular feature architecture or exactly how we did dependency injection. What we heard from them was that they wanted us to increase, what you see here, CPR is the acronym we came up with: consistency, predictability, reliability. So that was what was important to them, improving these things. Consistency, making it so that all of the features all are built in the same way. So it's easy to tell if you look at another feature that it is built the same way the other ones are, the ones that you have built. So you're familiar with the code, it all kind of works the same way. Predictability, reducing, like making things like routing and deep linking understandable, making sure that the code actually works the way you think it's going to work. Removing unintended effects. We're making a change somewhere in the product, for some reason, break something somewhere else. And reliability, again, making the code less fragile. So we're spending less time on regressions and incidents and things like that. So this was really what we wanted to focus on. And how do you do that? Well, we realized that if we wanted to increase consistency, we couldn't just do that by coming up with some feature architecture pattern and expecting every developer in the team to implement it exactly the same way. You can't just kind of hope that it'll work. We have to enforce these things through things like templates and linting and code generation, and basically, making it very easy for developers to know what the right thing is to do, and to do that, and much harder for them to do things that we don't want to do and reintroduce inconsistencies and anti-patterns. So if we've decided, we don't want developers to use singletons, we need to add a linting rule that actually prevents that, versus just kind of hoping that they won't. So what did we end up deciding to do as our main goals for modernization? Again, not going to get very deeply into this, but on iOS, the big push to break down the app into, again, service and feature modules. So increase modularization. We did decide to adopt a new feature architecture that's kind of Viper-like. We're adopting Combine. And this last one is actually pretty important. We're switching to using Bazel, which I don't know if folks are familiar with it, but Bazel is a build system that you can use in place of Xcode or sort of alongside Xcode. And it deals better with highly modularized projects, projects where there's many frameworks. Bazel handles that pretty well. And it also has a build cache, which means hopefully, again, we're going to see improved build times both locally and in CI by having a better caching of build artifacts. On Android, again, similar themes, completing modularization on that side as well, adopting some new frameworks and libraries to do things like networking and JSON parsing and configuration changes, and building abstractions around start activity and non-activity result. So why has this project been successful, or has it been successful? Well, we started off with the stabilization phase, and all goals of that phase were completed on time for both platforms. 100% completed everything. So that was certainly successful. We are now in the middle of the second phase, the modernization phase, and that's still in progress. So there's a bit of a caveat here. We're on track, but there's still a ways to go. So we're successful so far. Why has this been successful? Number one, it was an engineering-led initiative with executive prioritization and resourcing. And I think both of these things were really important and really key to the success. This has really been an engineering-driven, IC-driven project. It was engineers who came up with the initial proposals, who did the research, who figured out what the problems were and how that we should solve them, and who came up with all of the scoping and projects and proposals that have led to this project being to what we are actually doing as part of the project. So very much not a top-down project. It was very much driven by engineers, but it had executive prioritization and resourcing, which is equally key. This isn't something that you can kind of do as a side project. It really needs like dedicated resources, and it needs executives to sign on to the fact that we're going to do this in place of doing something else, in place of doing future work or whatever. And so we have to have that buy-in that this is the right thing to do, and we're going to get the resources to do it properly. Along with that, sponsorship from key engineering leaders outside of mobile helped us get that kind of buy-in. We had principal engineers and key managers who are willing to say, like, yes, this is super important and this is the right thing to do and we need to do it now. And that helped us get this kind of backing that we got to actually do the project correctly. Additionally, splitting the project into a couple of phases was really helpful, because having this initial stabilization phase, which was, we just knew what we had to do. We were getting rid of tech debt. Things were really well defined. We just had to execute on it. That gave us time to do R&D for the later phase. So during the stabilization phase, we were able to do the investigation and the prototyping and kind of figure out, like, what should we do for modernization, and make sure that we had all of those things set up and all of our scoping and all of that by the time we hit the modernization phase. And, finally, this one is very, very important. This has been a very metric and data-driven effort. We really wanted to have very clear metrics to measure, our progress, what we were doing, how successful we're being. And it wasn't just kind of tracking with, Jira or whatever. We were actually, running scripts on every file in the code base to track, how are we doing with these migrations? What progress have we made? Where are we? We had a lot of dashboards and graphs, and this is an example of, for each of the goals that we had, we would have, a dashboard saying, like, where are we with this in terms of progress on this measure? And that allowed us to do things like see if we were falling behind or we're doing fine. We could switch resources between different work streams if we needed to, if one of them wasn't doing as well. On this particular graph, you could see it doesn't quite go to 0 at the end. That was because we had ported the code to Swift, but some of it was still behind feature flags as we were rolling out those feature flags when this snapshot was taken. But basically, this was very, very helpful for the initial phase of the project, and we are continuing that in the modernization phase. We're really trying to come up with very clear metrics for each of our goals so that we can track it and see that we are being successful, and that enables us to, do resourcing planning and all sorts of things that are very, very helpful for the success of the project. So that is the end of my presentation. If you have, I don't think we're going to have time for questions, but feel free to reach out to me. I'll try to respond in the chat if folks have questions, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. Also, as other folks have mentioned, Slack is also hiring. We're hiring on the iOS team, we're hiring on Android, and we're hiring on other teams as well. So if you're interested, please check out the careers page at Slack.